So today we got out on the MT-09 and it was a really exciting day. It was colder than I thought it was. It warmed up a little in the early afternoon, but it never really got warm. Never really got into the 50s where you can actually say you're comfortable. But as always, and especially with this bike, always worth the ride. Now this morning Karen told me we have a few errands to do early, and that means probably by midday we'll be out on the open road, hopefully. Hopefully the day's going to play out well. It's still really cold in the morning, but by 11, 12 o'clock it gets up in the 40s, and it's really, I'm itching to get a ride in today, I'll be honest. And a really nice thing about this time of year, every day's a surprise. Some days you get up early and it's supposed to be rain, it doesn't rain. Some days, like today, it's chilly in the morning, but it's supposed to be nice in the afternoon. So every day, Karen and I try to plan out a day that at some point in that day, I get a chunk of time to get a ride in. I think I will get a nice ride in today. And it's sunny. As a free bonus, the sun is shining. I'm not sure what could be more fun than just having this MT-09 here. It's got about 5,000 miles on it. The most exciting part of owning this bike, I've had 2 flat tires already. Let's hope that's not a third one today. Anyway, time to get the farm in order and make our plan for the day. Speaking of tires, as I pre-flight the bike, I'm really liking this tire. It has really been, so far so good. But the biggest thing is I want to see the mileage. I want to see if that's any better than the 2s. Right now it seems like the handling is, if not as good, it's close. But the people I've talked to that have this tire say the big advantage is the mileage. Well, we're going to find out. Well, one thing we're going to have to deal with today, it's a beautiful day, but the wind is already blowing his wind noise. The stones are sparkling in the driveway, but the only thing, the wind is howling. It's already, we're going to have wind noise all day long. Look at the stones sparkling. I was like metal flake. Wow. I guess the couple of days of rain we had washed them down. Really nice. Karen's really happy. And very soon we're going to be working in the garden every day. And it does look like the weather's going to be decent, but we always do an extra cup of coffee and an extra weather check before we head out. Oh, I'm ready. It's warming up already. The final check of the weather. Pretty soon we're going to have flowers of our own, not from a florist. Final cup of coffee and we'll be out the door, baby. It is looking like it's going to be a beautiful afternoon. And we'll find out. Look at this, waiting patiently at the feeder. He knows there's no seeds in the feeder. He's waiting for me to get there. I'm a little slow this morning, guys. See that? I'm a little slow this morning, but you eventually get fed. Oh my God. Boy, this was a day worth waiting for. You can hear in the background there are a lot of sport bikes out today. And we hit a nice, real low traffic area today. Up in this area, more than likely you never see a car. And all the lakes are not frozen now. Everything's starting to thaw out. What you hear beeping there is house alarms. Boy, I just never get sick of riding these back roads. Never get sick of that quick shifter either. That quick shifter is great. Now these roads can be pretty challenging because sometimes there's stones and they're slippery. And it's especially bad right after it rains. It seems like they're slippery more than normal. Very peaceful area, and it's a nice place to have a quiet motorcycle. And I just never get sick of the various scenery. The lakes are beautiful. And the forsythias are in full bloom now. That's the first real sign of spring. That's a mean looking, nasty looking bike. Now with that styling, you either love it or hate it, and I just happen to love it. And on the back roads here, it's still a little bit of salt. And I love that traction control. Boy, that is so confidence inspiring. And that Michelin 5 seems to be working out real good. I'm just hoping it lasts. All of these sport bike tires, they definitely don't last 10,000 miles. But we're putting it to the test, and then the only way we're going to know is do the test ourselves. A lot of switchbacks up in this area too. And very soon all these leaves are going to start turning green. And I'm ready. I am really, really ready. We made it through a long winter, and we're right on the cusp of having spring. And it really just never got warmer today. It just hung in there in the mid-40s. I don't know why Usually it was getting warmer, but not today. And that's what I like, every day being different. No Groundhog Days. And still little salty spots, I'm surprised. And these are the kind of roads that this bike is in its element. It just couldn't be better. A perfect area and a perfect bike. And some of these roads are really challenging. You don't really see it on the video. They're challenging. And one downside, it's still a lot of potholes they haven't fixed yet. And it's wonderful having a bike so quiet that you don't disturb the peace. Anytime I go through the populated areas, I'm so happy the bike is quiet. And very soon we're going to see some green leaves budding. On this ride, I actually saw a few flowers coming up. And pretty soon Karen's garden will be blooming every day. And we waited through a really long winter for this spring, and it's here at last. I just hope we don't get any more snow and they salt the roads again. So what a spectacular day this turned out to be. Wow. Now we get some good information to share on the end of this video. Our ride is basically over, but there's some really good information I think you can use if you're going to ever buff out paint. And we're going to tack that onto the end of the video. And we really do love our MT-09, and every time we ride it, we like it just a little bit more. This is just one really fun bike to ride. If you've never ridden one, wait for that Yamaha test day and get on the list. This is a must, especially if you haven't ridden a really modern bike in a long time. This one is really going to open your eyes. And so much fun to ride. In the meantime, I want to thank the healthcare workers. Thank you guys so much. I do appreciate it, and I really appreciate it more than you'll ever know. Thought I'd mention this. This would be a good time to do it. Why do you use 20 here? Let's just show it. 2500 grit sandpaper. Well, why don't you use, for instance, 1000 grit paper, or whatever. And believe me, we have a lot of sandpaper here. What I've done over the years is I've experimented with, now back in the old days, boy, the old days, we're a long ways away. In the 80s, the way you would take a model plane and make it shiny is you'd put basically lacquer, butyrate dope is lacquer, you butyrate dope, put 10 coats on, get plenty of it on, and then what you would do is take, and I remember Harold Price teaching me this in the 60s, and he was one of the best. You take 400 grit sandpaper. Imagine you'd never use 400 on this. And you'd sand it out, and then you'd go get red rubbing compound and an electric drill with a pad, and or you'd do it by hand, and it would eventually shine a little bit. It would come up. Well, yeah, what's happened though is in the modern world, using these paints, and the other question I wanted to make sure everybody understood, because I get questions every day from people that look at the video and they know, well, they want to add to this. Now, a lot of my friends, it's hard to say how many, but probably there's at least 10 people in my circle of friends from modeling and motorcycles and model railroad that are real craftsmen that watch a video and they want to pick out the fine points, and I happen to be one of them. I look at every video on YouTube about buffing and finishing and ammo New York City and I think, well, okay, I could learn from every one of these people. That's the whole point. But what I've done when I transitioned from the world of lacquer into modern paint, certain things change. Now, in a two-part, when you're doing a two-part, usually, in this case, it's black. That black never really is shiny. No matter what you do, even if you buff it out, you got to put the clear on. Now, what I do, and this part has now Bulldog, it's got 3 coats of black on it. It's got 6 coats of clear, maybe 5 or 6. I don't know. We're going to sand a lot of it off. But I don't go by the normal way people would paint a car. First off, you'd use less paint. But on a part like this, there's edges and corners and all kinds of stuff. And I don't want to be at the final point where I am today, where I'm going to buff this out and go through a corner. So by having all that extra paint, the paint relative to the job is a small fraction of what's involved in doing it. So I'm just really willing to put more paint on. But I sand a lot of it off. So look at this part up close. I don't know, you can see this was sprayed. And what happens, because I don't have a spray booth. Now, sure, if I had a spray booth, there'd be less dust in here. Yeah, definitely. But you know what? You'd never get the finish that I get sprayed. You gotta buff it. There's just no way. Believe me. If you had Chip Foose's spray booth, you are not going to get that finish perfect like it is when you buff it. And the buffing, the way I found to do it with this material, and this is 2-part urethane, the black is 1 and the clear, and it's so easy to do this. I've had probably 20 people in the shop already, Larry and Glenn and Vince and people that can pick this up so quickly, and that's why we make all these videos. Because the other side of this is, here's a good test for you. Go to somebody who's a professional, has a body shop, pays rent, pays an electric bill in there. Ask them how much it is to paint a bike. But first of all, half of them won't do it because it's a lot of labor. That's the whole reason. So anyway, we're in a unique situation. The other thing I have over 50 years of working with paint. So I have a good background that a lot of people don't have. Maybe not that many people at all. So anyway, as I've transitioned into this material, I found it so easy to use that I was more than happy to make these videos, and I hope people enjoyed them, of course. So I just want to do this in pieces. I'm going to take any spot, no matter. And again, here's what people want to do. This takes a little more time to sand with 2500. It takes probably twice the amount of time as if you sand with 1200, 1500. But 1200 and 1500 leave sanding scratches. Every time the grit gets more gritty, it takes the paint off. It takes less time to sand. But the problem is if you're going to buff it, you've got to buff out the scratches. Now, and you better have a lot of paint on there when you go to buff it. I mean, Vlad's Bomota, that belly pan has, I don't even know how much paint. I just kept painting it until the cows came home. But the problem is, and this is what slips by a lot of people. They look at the videos I've made since '87, and they say, "Boy, Windy doesn't have a shop. He doesn't have fancy things and no tools, and he doesn't have a spray booth, and he doesn't have $100 spray gun." But in the end, I got the paint that wins the show. So I don't know. I'm not so sure that's my ego speaking that, but we have won a lot of awards, and that's the end of that. We don't need to go into that.
The day after you win them, nobody cares. Even the bikes I did for Ray, that's won awards. In fact, Ray's never lost an award either, I don't think. All beside the point. The point is, you can pass this information on to people in a very timely, thanks to YouTube, you can do this, and it's very easy, I think, anyway. I want to show this. This is the amount of time it takes when you do it this way. And I'm not saying this is the only way or the best way, or this is the way I've developed to do my painting. And we paint probably 8-10 bikes a year here. We do most of it in the winter. We do almost none of it in the summer. Of course, we're out riding, of course. But here's the end of this little drill with 2,500 paper. Yes, this does take time. And yes, it's nice and shiny, and probably a lot of people would love to have that finish, but yeah. But we want it to be this finish. Now see, it has a little bit of a gloss. That's called candling. A little gloss, but that's really what that's all about. Now, from this point on, the parts are sanded flat. Once you have that flat surface, and it's got a very little gloss to it, whether you use 2000 grit or if you use 2500, I've even used 3000. And you could settle in on whatever seems to be the most comfortable for you. Now, there are 3 CRC products that I've used. There's a rough, a medium, and a fine. I think you can copy the numbers right off the video. When I started this, and this is really important, this is a good thing to know, I started with the roughest one, got a separate pad on, put the medium one on, and then finally finished with the fine one. But as years went by, many years went by, and this is a 5-year-old video, that's why I'm writing over I'm doing a voiceover over the footage. This became apparent that it was, for the work that I was doing, it just was a lot of extra work and it didn't pay a lot of dividends. So the product that I replaced this whole system with was 8065. And I did have all 3 of the CRC products, and that's why I'm re-editing this video, because we're kind of updating it. The 4CR product 8065 can be put on a brand new pad, and some of the more modern videos, these are re-edited videos. The modern videos I try to include all of the updates on. Well, the older one here, and this we're doing it a little bit different, and I just thought this is worth showing, to show how some of the work that I've done in the shop has evolved over the years. Now, this would require a lot more material to have 3 separate 4CR products, when in the modern paint and the modern sanding with 2000 grit, this is how it evolved over many, many years, into just having the 8065 and a brand new pad. And you can look at any of the more modern buffing videos, the ones that are only a year old or 2 years old, and you'll see that system is just a lot easier and less time consuming than this is. Now, I always do one of these little things in real time without a camera cut, just to show how many minutes is involved in doing one little spot. The thing I didn't show here that's important, and it's a step that I've come to appreciate, is changing to a brand new pad is a critical thing when you're using 8065. That combination of a brand new pad and 8065 eliminates all the steps. Now this is just when 5 years ago, how we were doing things. You can see it's a beautiful shine, and it's absolutely perfect. But the more modern system that I'm using with just the 8065 just goes a lot quicker. And that's a system we've used on many, many motorcycles, including the FZR restoration, the Ninja restoration. Some of the ones that were really labor intensive, anytime I can save a little time, wow, I am just so happy with it. Now, using a little Harbor Freight buffer and a brand new pad and the 8065, whether you sand with 2000 or 2500, it can go a lot faster than you think it can. And the lesson to learn of everything is, if you just take the buffer and buff and try to cheat the sanding, what happens is you spend 10 times the amount of time buffing, and you run that risk that the buffer is going to go through. When you do it with all sanding or 90% sanding, and you just run the buffer over it at the very end, which I just did here, in a matter of a minute, maybe 2 minutes, I didn't time it, you wind up having just an incredibly nice finish in a really short amount of time. And where you wind up spending most of the time is on the sanding. I'd say you spend 90% of the time on the sanding, 10% on the buffing. The other way, if you do 10% sanding, you're going to spend 8,000 times buffing. And if you don't do any sanding at all and just buffing, you're never really going to get that flat, what I call the flat mirror finish, where when a light hits it, it just responds beautifully. Now, whether you buff by hand, which is what I'm doing here, or you buff out with any machine, there's any endless amounts of machine, but I found the most handy for motorcycle parts, not cars. I don't buff my car with that little buffer. It's great. It's absolutely perfect on using when you're using small motorcycle parts, a gas tank, a fender, anything like that. And you can see it even buffs up quickly. Even when you buff up by hand, it comes up very quickly. It's good information. And sometimes you have to improvise, whether you can put it on a table or your knee or some other part that you can get it buffed easily. So I always finish up the project with a clean microfiber. Hopefully you have one in your house that isn't full of all wax and grit and grease. That final paint, and that paint stays soft for longer than you think it does, so you don't want to scratch it. I usually work in the winter so that paint gets plenty of dry time up by a heating vent before I actually do buff it. But the longer you let paint dry before you buff it, it just seems to be a lot easier. So I hope this was useful information. Sometimes that buffing thing can make you crazy, but once you get it right, and it's really not that difficult, it opens the door to having a world of polished cars and parts and motorcycles, and I've done even things around the house. But our channel is about information sharing. That's the goal of everything. Sometimes it gets a little lengthy. Sometimes we just do things on a spur of the moment, and it turns out to be good information. Now, whether we ride, work on motorcycles, buff, polish, we try to do as many things as we have some information on doing it the right way. Well, and if we find something out, we always try to share it. Some of the information at the end of this video is updated from 5 years ago, but it's still good information. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.